What if everything you've been taught about kindness, loyalty, and love is only half the story? Niccolo Machiavelli, the infamous political thinker, argued that in a dangerous world, warmth of heart can be a fatal weakness, even when it comes to the people closest to you. In this video, we explore why Machiavelli believed that to survive and lead, you must become cold-blooded, even with your loved ones. Not out of cruelty, but out of strategy. Let's dive into his chilling yet brutally honest advice. Machiavelli begins with a simple yet devastating truth. The world is not what it pretends to be. Most people walk through life believing in ideals: honesty, loyalty, compassion, and mutual respect. These values are instilled from childhood, reinforced by religion, culture, and stories. We're taught to believe that if we treat others well, they will return the favor. That if we are good, life will reward us. But Machiavelli pulls back the curtain and exposes a different world entirely. A world where appearances are often masks, where intentions are rarely pure, and where power, not virtue, determines who rises and who falls. For him, politics, relationships, and even love are not governed by morality, but by self-interest, deception, and the hunger for control. He observed that humans, by nature, are fickle. They are grateful when they benefit from you, but their loyalty is shallow. If your fortunes decline, if you become less useful, or if you stand in the way of their desires, the very people who once praised you will turn against you without hesitation. This is not cynicism. It is, in Machiavelli's view, a realistic understanding of human behavior. Take, for example, a man who leads with honesty and compassion, assuming others will do the same. Such a man might build strong relationships at first, but when adversity strikes, when money, status, or power are on the line, he often finds himself betrayed. His allies disappear. His kindness is remembered as weakness. The people he trusted reveal themselves to have been opportunists, waiting for a chance to exploit his virtue. Machiavelli believed that those who survive, those who truly thrive, are not the ones who rely on the goodness of others, but those who recognize the game being played around them and learn how to play it better. This doesn't mean abandoning all morality, but it means being selective, strategic, cold when necessary. It's easy to imagine that these rules apply only to kings, politicians, or ruthless businessmen, but Machiavelli's insight is deeper than that. He saw that power dynamics exist in every sphere of life, not just in palaces, but in families, friendships, marriages, and communities. He understood that people hide their true intentions, even from those closest to them. A smiling friend may be secretly envious. A supportive sibling may harbor resentment. A loving partner may manipulate to get what they want. This is why Machiavelli believed it is dangerous to assume the world is good. That assumption blinds you, it leaves you unprepared, it invites betrayal. Those who see the world clearly, who understand the masks, the motives, the hidden strategies, are not disillusioned. They are empowered. Because once you understand what's really happening beneath the surface, you can protect yourself. You can choose when to trust, when to give, and when to walk away. And make no mistake, Machiavelli is not suggesting you become paranoid or hateful. He is not calling for cruelty for its own sake. What he is calling for is awareness, a certain emotional detachment, a willingness to see people not just as they present themselves, but as they truly are, driven by need, by fear, by desire, by ambition. Most people are playing a role, and the better you understand that, the less likely you are to be caught off guard. The kindest face can conceal ruthless ambition. The most devoted friend can hide a secret rivalry. And unless you are prepared for that, unless you allow yourself to see the world in its raw and uncomfortable truth, you will eventually pay the price for your innocence. So when Machiavelli speaks of becoming cold-blooded, it starts here, not with cruelty, but with clarity. The world is not fair, people are not always good, and appearances are rarely honest. Once you accept this, you can begin to move through life not as a victim, but as a player in the game. And only then can you protect yourself, and perhaps even thrive, in a world that rewards the cold-blooded far more often than it does the kind. In The Prince, Machiavelli presents one of the most provocative questions in political philosophy. Is it better for a ruler to be loved or feared? It's a question that seems simple at first, yet Machiavelli's answer cuts against everything we are taught about leadership, morality, and human connection. He says, "It is much safer to be feared than loved. Not better, not more noble, safer." And safety for Machiavelli is everything. This isn't just about kings and rulers. It's about you, me, and anyone who must navigate relationships, ambitions, and power structures. Because at some point in your life, you will be forced to choose between being liked and being respected, between being agreeable and being in control, between pleasing others and protecting your position. Machiavelli urges us to recognize that when the two come into conflict, you must always choose respect and fear over love. Why? Because love, as he explains, is a fragile emotion. People love you based on conditions, based on how you make them feel, how much you give them, how useful or charming or entertaining you are. Love is conditional, temporary, and deeply dependent on circumstance. If you stop delivering what others want from you, their love disappears. If you become a burden, they turn away. If someone else offers them more, they shift their allegiance. Love, in Machiavelli's view, is like a breeze. It can change direction with the slightest wind. Fear, however, is different. Fear is rooted in self-preservation. If people fear you, if they know there will be consequences for disrespecting or betraying you, they are far more likely to remain loyal, or at the very least, cautious. Fear imposes boundaries. It demands a level of behavior and respect that love simply cannot sustain. And crucially, fear can be controlled. It is not about cruelty, but about predictability. If people know you are willing to act decisively, even ruthlessly when necessary, they will think twice before crossing you. Machiavelli was not advocating for tyranny or sadism. He understood that excessive cruelty leads to rebellion. A ruler or any leader must strike a balance, but he believed that it is far easier to maintain order through fear than through affection. Because people are unreliable, selfish, and easily swayed. They may sing your praises today, but if things turn difficult, if your leadership is challenged, if you lose power, if a more appealing option comes along, they will abandon you in a heartbeat. He observed this pattern again and again in history. Think about your own experiences. Have you ever gone out of your way to be kind, to be generous, to be the nice guy or nice girl? And did you ever notice how, despite your good intentions, people began to take advantage of you? To ignore your boundaries? To assume you would always say yes? This is the danger of relying too much on being loved. Love, without strength, makes you vulnerable. It makes people comfortable walking over you. Machiavelli would argue that if you want to lead, even in your personal life, you must cultivate a reputation for decisiveness and strength. You must make it clear that you are not to be taken lightly, that betrayal has consequences, that you do not tolerate disrespect, even from those closest to you, not because you enjoy punishment or control, but because you understand human nature. You understand that power, when not protected, invites exploitation. Even in families, Machiavelli's principle applies. Parents who are too lenient with their children often lose control. Siblings who give endlessly without setting limits can become the emotional dumping grounds of the household. Partners who bend over backwards to avoid conflict often find themselves disrespected. In every close relationship, the danger is the same. When love is not balanced with firmness, it leads to imbalance. One gives, the other takes. One tolerates, the other abuses. Machiavelli believed that effective leadership, even of a home, a friendship, or a business, requires the cold-blooded willingness to be disliked. You cannot please everyone. You should not even try. If your goal is to maintain integrity, clarity, and control, then sometimes you must say no. You must draw lines. You must be feared, not in the sense of terror, but in the sense of commanding respect. People must know that you are not weak, that your decisions have weight. And here lies one of Machiavelli's most powerful lessons. Love can make you feel good, but fear makes you effective. Those who seek only to be loved are often crushed when love fades or turns to resentment. Those who understand the deeper mechanics of respect, consequence, and fear are the ones who remain standing when the chaos comes. In the end, Machiavelli forces us to confront a truth that many shy away from. To hold power, even in the smallest of circles, you must be willing to sacrifice the comfort of affection for the security of strength. You must be cold-blooded enough to enforce your boundaries, even if it means disappointing or intimidating the people you care about. Because the hard truth is this: it is better to be feared and respected than to be loved and destroyed. Machiavelli knew something that most people refuse to admit. Sentimentality is a trap. It's the comforting lie we wrap ourselves in, believing that emotions like love, guilt, nostalgia, and compassion are always virtuous. But Machiavelli didn't see emotions that way. He saw them as tools, sometimes useful, but more often dangerous. He believed that when sentimentality governs your decisions, it weakens your judgment, clouds your vision, and ultimately makes you vulnerable to manipulation. When you lead with your heart instead of your head, you often hesitate when you should act. You forgive when you should walk away. You cling to people who drain you simply because you've built an emotional story around them. They've been in my life for so long, or they're family, or they didn't mean it. But these are just stories. Sentimentality, Machiavelli believed, is the enemy of clarity. It doesn't show you people as they are, it shows you people as you want them to be. Machiavelli understood that the more you are emotionally attached, the more power you give away. You begin to make exceptions. You begin to rationalize behavior that harms you. You avoid confrontation not because it's unwise, but because it's uncomfortable. You let your love, or your pity, or your loyalty become the leash someone else uses to control you. And in doing so, you abandon your own strength. He observed that those in power, rulers, generals, even parents, often fall not because of their enemies, but because of their unwillingness to act decisively against those they care about. The ruler who refuses to punish a disloyal advisor because they're old friends. The king who keeps a corrupt relative in power out of family loyalty. The leader who overlooks failure out of personal affection. Over time, these sentimental choices accumulate, and they erode the very foundations of control. They invite disobedience, betrayal, and decay. You can see this clearly in everyday life. A boss who keeps underperforming staff out of personal fondness ends up damaging the whole team. A person who stays in a toxic relationship because of shared memories sacrifices their own well-being. A parent who can't discipline their child because they feel bad raises someone who doesn't respect boundaries. In every case, sentimentality has replaced sound judgment. Emotion has taken precedence over principle. Machiavelli would not have been surprised. He believed that those who want to maintain power, any kind of power, whether political, professional, or personal, must learn to suppress their softer instincts when necessary. This doesn't mean becoming unfeeling. It means knowing when to feel, and more importantly, when not to. It means recognizing that the people who are closest to you often have the greatest power to exploit your emotions. And unless you are prepared for that, unless you are willing to act coldly when the situation demands it, you will be used. He did not view this as cruelty, he viewed it as clarity. A sentimental ruler, he argued, is like a blind captain sailing through dangerous waters with no map. They may have the best intentions, but that won't stop the ship from crashing. And when it does, their good heart won't save them. Only wisdom will. Machiavelli's advice was clear. You must be willing to look past your feelings and see the reality beneath them. That friend who always needs your help but never returns it, what are they really giving you? That family member who constantly criticizes you under the mask of love, are they building you up or tearing you down? That partner who repeatedly breaks promises, are they truly sorry or simply counting on your softness? Sentimentality tells you to give them another chance. Cold-blooded clarity tells you to observe their pattern. Sentimentality hopes they'll change. Cold-blooded clarity knows that people rarely do unless they're forced to. Sentimentality says, "But I care about them." Cold-blooded clarity replies, "And how has that been working out for you?" One of Machiavelli's most radical teachings is that power, true lasting power, requires emotional discipline. It requires that you prioritize effectiveness over comfort. You must be willing to make decisions that hurt now, but protect you later. That may mean cutting ties. That may mean saying no. That may mean letting go of people you once thought you could never live without. And yes, it may hurt, but pain is temporary. Regret lasts much longer. Machiavelli did not write for those who wanted to be liked. He wrote for those who wanted to survive, to lead, to thrive in a world where sentiment is often a mask for exploitation. He understood that those who cannot control their emotions will eventually be controlled by someone else's. He understood that people will often test your limits, not out of malice, but out of instinct. And if you keep giving them more rope, they will take it until you hang yourself with it. So if you wish to be strong, not just in the world, but in your own soul, you must learn to step back from your feelings and ask, what is truly happening here? What does this person's behavior say? Not their words, not their apologies, not their excuses, but their actions. And then, with that knowledge, you must be prepared to act. Calmly, without guilt, without drama. Cold-blooded, yes, but clear-eyed, strong, and free. Because in the end, sentimentality may win you temporary peace, but clarity, that brutal, courageous clarity, wins you your freedom. When most people hear the phrase cold-blooded, they imagine cruelty, a heartless tyrant, a manipulative monster, someone who feels nothing, who cuts down others without remorse. But that isn't what Machiavelli meant, not at all. In fact, to him, being cold-blooded was not about being cruel. It was about being clear, composed, and emotionally disciplined. It was about resisting the chaotic pull of feelings in order to make decisions that protect you, your purpose, and your power. Cruelty in Machiavelli's mind is impulsive. It's driven by ego, by uncontrolled anger, by insecurity. A cruel person lashes out because they can't control themselves. But a cold-blooded person chooses to act, not out of rage, but out of reason. They do not punish out of pride. They act decisively because they understand what is necessary for survival, for structure, for strength. You can still be a person of warmth. You can love deeply, show kindness, and help others. Machiavelli doesn't tell us to become emotionless robots. Instead, he tells us to develop the ability to pause our emotions when it's time to make hard choices, to be capable of stepping outside the fog of feelings and asking, what is the right move? Not for comfort, but for clarity. Imagine someone in a leadership position, a manager, a parent, a partner. They may care deeply about the people in their life. They may want to be fair, supportive, and kind. But what happens when a tough call must be made? What happens when someone is taking advantage of their patience? What happens when the team or the household is suffering because one person refuses to change? Sentimentality might say, give them more time. Be understanding. Don't upset them. But a cold-blooded mind asks, how much longer can we afford this? To be cold-blooded is to recognize that hard truths are sometimes more merciful than comforting lies. That saying no can be more loving than saying yes. That holding someone accountable, even when it causes tension, is better than enabling their slow decline. It's not about being aggressive, it's about being firm, not about being cold-hearted, but cool-headed. Machiavelli would argue that many people suffer because they are too afraid to be seen as harsh. They don't speak up when boundaries are crossed. They avoid conflict even when their peace is being destroyed. They hold back from taking bold action because they don't want to appear heartless. But in doing so, they lose control. They allow small problems to grow into disasters. They let others define their lives. Being cold-blooded means you have the strength to make decisions that others avoid. It means you're not trapped by guilt, shame, or fear of judgment. You can let someone go who no longer respects you. You can walk away from a deal that no longer serves you. You can enforce a consequence, even if it upsets someone you care about. Why? Because you've done the work of separating emotion from responsibility. Think of a doctor performing surgery. If they allowed their fear of hurting the patient to stop them, the patient would die. The surgeon must act with precision. Sometimes they must cut in order to heal. This is the essence of cold-bloodedness, the courage to do what is necessary, even when it's difficult, even when others don't understand, even when your own heart protests. In relationships, this can be especially challenging. You might love someone who's deeply troubled, someone who keeps making promises they never keep. You want to believe in them. You want to give them another chance. You remember all the good times. But a cold-blooded mindset tells you to look at the pattern, not the excuses, to judge the reality of who they are, not the fantasy of who you wish they were. And when the evidence becomes overwhelming, it empowers you to choose your well-being over their comfort. This approach doesn't make you unkind. In fact, it makes your kindness stronger, because it comes from a place of self-respect, not self-sacrifice. It comes from a place of control, not codependency. You're not kind because you have to be, or because you're afraid of conflict, but because you choose to be, from a position of strength. And when that strength is tested, you do not collapse into passivity. You act calmly, clearly, without hesitation. And this is the great paradox Machiavelli understood. Cold-blooded people are often more just than emotional ones, because they're not ruled by bias or favoritism. They don't bend the rules for the people they like, or lash out at the ones they don't. They are measured, consistent, and deliberate. They know the cost of inaction. They understand that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is tell someone the truth, even if it stings. Being cold-blooded also means being able to walk alone when necessary. To stand by a decision you know is right, even when it costs you popularity, approval, or applause. It means being immune to emotional manipulation, the kind that uses guilt, tears, or drama to control you. Machiavelli would say, if you let someone else's emotions override your judgment, you've already given them your power. In the end, being cold-blooded is not about being distant. It's about being discerning. It's not about shutting down feelings. It's about not letting feelings dictate your fate. It's about developing the inner steel that allows you to move through life with clarity, strength, and calm, no matter what storm you face. Machiavelli didn't write for the weak-hearted. He wrote for those who wanted to thrive in a world that is often harsh and unpredictable, and his message still echoes, don't be cruel, don't be heartless, but above all, don't be naive. Be strong enough to love, but stronger still to act when love is not enough. Be warm when you can, but cold when you must. That's not evil, that's power, and that's survival. Machiavelli's final and most essential lesson is that if you want to endure in this world, whether as a leader, a lover, a creator, or simply as a person trying to live with purpose, you must place strategy above sympathy. Not because sympathy is unimportant, but because it is unreliable when it becomes the sole compass guiding your decisions. Strategy, on the other hand, offers a deeper kind of wisdom. It demands foresight. It asks you to act not based on how you feel in a fleeting moment, but based on where you're going, who you are becoming, and what must be protected along the way. Sympathy is seductive. It feels good to be kind. It feels noble to sacrifice for others. It feels right to forgive again and again. And in many moments, that instinct is necessary and even beautiful. But Machiavelli reminds us, if you only operate from that place, if you only think with your heart, you will be manipulated, drained, and left behind by those who are thinking 5 moves ahead. Strategy begins with seeing things as they are, not as you wish them to be. This is perhaps the most difficult shift a person can make. Most people are taught to see the world through stories, fairy tales, family beliefs, romantic ideals. We believe good deeds will be rewarded, that sincerity will be met with sincerity, that if we give enough, we will eventually be recognized and appreciated. But Machiavelli says no, that is not the world, that is a fantasy, and those who live by fantasy in a world of wolves will be devoured. To place strategy above sympathy means to assess each relationship, each opportunity, each decision, not through the lens of guilt or nostalgia, but through the lens of cost, consequence, and alignment. Is this person helping you build a stronger life, or are they pulling you away from it? Is this sacrifice leading to growth, or is it enabling someone else's stagnation? Is your loyalty being honored, or is it being taken for granted? Most people don't ask these questions. They stay in roles that no longer fit them. They cling to people who treat them as optional. They give to those who only take. Why? Because they feel bad. Because they've confused self-sacrifice with love. Because they believe that being a good person means always saying yes, even when it destroys them. But Machiavelli's voice cuts through this confusion like a blade. He who does what ought to be done rather than what is done will bring about his ruin. In other words, trying to live by ideals in a world that runs on power and perception is a dangerous game. You must learn how things really work and make your moves accordingly. That's not to say you must become manipulative or cold-hearted. In fact, true strategy requires a great deal of emotional intelligence. You must be able to read people, You must understand what motivates them: fear, desire, approval, ambition. You must observe what they do when no one is watching, how they behave when they have nothing to gain, and then you must act not with impulse, but with intent. The cold-blooded strategist knows that sometimes silence is more powerful than confrontation, that walking away can send a louder message than yelling. That setting a boundary, even if it disappoints someone, is a declaration of self-respect. That not every fight is worth engaging in, and that not every person deserves your time, your forgiveness, or your energy. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you learn to care with limits. You learn to care without abandoning yourself. You learn to say, "I understand your pain, but I will not allow your pain to become my prison." You learn to be compassionate without being consumed. Machiavelli would argue that true power lies in this kind of self-mastery. Most people are not ruled by reason. They are ruled by fear, guilt, and habit. They respond to pressure. They react to emotion. But the person who can remain calm when others panic, who can stay focused when others get distracted, who can make hard choices with clarity, that person becomes unshakable. And perhaps this is the greatest tragedy Machiavelli saw in the human condition, that so many people with good hearts fail to protect themselves. They confuse softness with virtue and believe that if they just love harder, endure longer, or forgive more, things will get better. But without strategy, goodness is not enough. Without boundaries, compassion becomes a weapon used against you. Without clarity, love becomes a trap. Machiavelli didn't write for villains, he wrote for realists. He wrote for those who understood that the world is not fair and never will be, that people are not always honest and often never were, and that if you do not learn to guard yourself, if you do not learn to think like a strategist, you will spend your life reacting, regretting, and reliving the same wounds. So what does it mean then to live strategically? It means pausing before you act. It means asking, what is the cost of this choice? What does this person's behavior tell me? Am I giving from a place of power or from a fear of loss? It means planning your life like a chessboard, not a fairy tale. It means honoring your future more than your feelings. And this is not a cold or bitter way to live. It is a clear one, because when you operate from strategy, your kindness becomes more meaningful. Your love becomes more focused. Your time, your energy, your attention, they all become sacred, and only those who truly earn them will receive them. In the end, Machiavelli's lesson is this: you were not born to be a martyr. You were not born to be a servant to other people's moods, needs, or manipulations. You were born to build something lasting, something strong, and that requires more than a soft heart. It requires a sharp mind, a mind that is not afraid to be cold when the moment demands it, a mind that does not flinch when others protest, a mind that places strategy above sympathy, not out of cruelty, but out of a deep, unshakable understanding. If you don't protect your life like it matters, no one else will.